Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, man. How are you?
Good, man. So here we are. Well, I guess like we were both. I felt a little bit of little angst inside of you when I jumped on, and I'm feeling the same. And I think part of it is this idea of right now it's the end of August, the last week of August, and September starts for us here September starts everywhere, but in the northern hemisphere here for us in the west, we have some school starting for the with the kids, and with that brings on a whole other, I guess, a whole new and whole, I guess, going back to routines and rituals and all this new stuff, and we're learning these new things. We're going to be, our kids going to be meeting all these new people, these new classmates and teachers, and us with our potentially new parents, and going back into the fall. And so I think the fall brings on a lot of really great stuff, like going back to routines, but also brings up a lot of just a lot of potentially anxieties and stress and kind of new things and old things and things we forgot about, and yeah, so we're feeling that. So let's get into it. Let's get
Change,
into all
right?
of this.
It's change. You can get. I mean, we've still got routines now in the summer, but I feel like they're, at least around here, they're a little more relaxed. There's not as much, pressure around time and needing to be places. We just don't have. There's not as much going on, which is great. And come next week, yeah, routines change and schedules change, and there is a little bit more in the calendar, and wanting to help the kids get out the door a little bit earlier, especially the older ones. Tino, I got, what is it, a tween and a teen. Their schedule's been pretty different in terms of staying up late and sleeping in right now. So that's a bit of, well, they're up a little bit earlier this week for camp. So next week's gonna be a bit of a shock. But yeah, I can feel it's a combination of energies, right? And feelings. It's like I'm excited for September. I feel like there's this energy ever since maybe it's because of the school system. I feel like, oh, it's September. Yes, okay. I'm gonna get these things going, and I feel it every year. So I look forward to September in one respect, to take things a little bit easier in the summer and enjoy outdoors, enjoy the weather and different weather. But yeah, so there is an excitement of just, a couple of my kids are like, yeah, we're gonna lock in come September, and so that is a good thing. And then there's also the just a little bit of nervousness around, or anxiousness around, like, okay, yeah, there is a lot. Like, I coach my youngest's soccer team, so there's all those things in the calendar now, and I signed up to be on her school pack as vice chair, so I've got extra things there that I haven't done before. So yes, there is just like, oh, okay, how is this all gonna work out? But I mean, it does. It's just, before it, there's just a little bit of apprehension and wanting to make sure it's going to go well.
Yeah, totally. So what are some of the things that you guys are, let's say, going back to in terms of routines and things that you feel are things that are just important for you and your family?
That's a good question. Um, I mean, routine wise, I do like setting up our kids so that they can be the ones getting themselves out the door and on time to school. Like, sometimes, yeah, they need an extra boost, especially perhaps next week. But I know this isn't exactly a ritual, but it's just a mindset I have around making sure that I'm not their alarm clock. Like, I don't, it's just this sort of overall philosophy I have on, I don't want them to be dependent on external forces, right? I want a lot of things to be intrinsic for them. So I want them to be, you know, inspired and excited to go to school, which isn't certainly always the case, especially with the older ones. But I do want them to be responsible for getting themselves up, ready, fed, and out the door. And obviously, at different ages, to different degrees, we're helping that process. But generally, that's my mindset around just getting up and out the door, which is going to be pretty early next week. And it does mess things up, given that there's three of them in three different schools. If one of them isn't on the program, but anyways, that's my
Three different schools, man. Yeesh.
that is my mindset just around morning routine. And one thing we used to do, which we didn't last year, but maybe it's not going to work as well. But I think it works really well when they're all younger. Is having the meals. My wife used to do this, and it was great. It was posted, and it was like, here's the meal plan for every day. So
Mm,
therefore, it's kind of like my outfit. I don't like to have to decide every morning what I'm going to wear. I just love to simplify that decision so that I can put my mind power and emotions around what I'm going to wear to something else. And with the meal plan, I thought it was just great because then there wasn't any debate in the morning on, oh, I want oatmeal and I want eggs and I want and trying to cook three different breakfasts, which I found worked awesome when they were younger. It was just like, here's breakfast on Monday, here's breakfast on Tuesday, here's breakfast on Thursday, and I do find, I guess that's the same with their schedules in terms of what activities they have is even super early on, like even 5 or 6, it was, our youngest really liked to know what the schedule was. And therefore, it wasn't always like, oh, really that? And oh, I got that. And like it found like they don't like surprises. They
mm,
really like to
hmm.
know ahead of time. And so having the food on a schedule and having a big one we had written up in terms of like what was happening, when was soccer and when was, dance and everything like that was on a calendar as well. So that really helped her. I could see, even just herself plan ahead energetically at least of what was coming up.
Right. That's really cool. I never considered the idea of a meal plan for breakfast. That's a great idea. We often have a challenge in the morning, like, oh, I don't want that, or I'm going to go make this. Oh, I don't want that. And then I'm having to make 3 different breakfasts, and that's
Yeah.
great.
And,
I
and I
like
guess
that.
and the key would be to front load that with meeting with them and an agreement of what goes on there too, so that again doesn't feel forced from the outside. It's like, yeah, no,
Hmm.
no, no, we all made this together, and there's a little bit of debate. Okay, okay, we agreed on this, and therefore it's like, well, look, this is what we agreed to. This is what we committed to. This is what you said you wanted, ahead of time. That
Hmm.
again, that so many ways that plays out and how important that is to get, in my opinion, that agreement up front so that they
Yeah.
don't feel like it's something because there's enough of that, especially when they get to school of like, here's what you have to do, or here's what's going to be forced on you, or here's the way you have to, behave or whatever. I just feel like the more, um, chance they have to feel empowered, to have choice, to be involved, and to co-create that schedule ahead of time, I just think leads to, yeah, really good things.
Yeah. I think one thing you mentioned was great was just having those different anchors that will help the kids through the process and how important that is. And also for us, like how much we forget. We believe that we're somehow like these evolved creatures when we get to be adults, but really like we are just like kids in that sense that we really crave routine. And something that popped in my head while you were talking was this idea from I got well from a lot of people, but it sticks into my head from Jocko Willink. He said his book "Discipline is Freedom," and these disciplines that we have, especially with the new school year coming, so there's going to be a lot of unknowns. There's going to be a lot of variables that our kids are going to have to play with and deal with new teachers, new friends, new grades, new things that they're going to learning all the time. And so if all of their whole day was just thrust into uncertainty, that's just total chaos, and they don't deal well with that. Neither do we. So the more anchor points of certainty that we can give them along the way, whether it's this is your morning time, this is your morning routine, this is what's for breakfast, this is what your lunch is, this is what we're doing after, like all those things, I believe help our kids and help us to actually be able to be at peace with all of the other chaos that's going to be happening, because we know, okay, there's an anchor point that's going to happen later on. Like there's going to be this thing that's going to happen that I know because we talked about it. And like you said, we have these agreements is just so key. Like one thing I realized over the summertime is, especially with my youngest, who's 4.5 now, she would get up in the morning and she'd say, "What are we doing today?" And she'd think like we have this plan, because a lot of times we have a plan of what would, and so often it's like, well, I don't know what we're like, what do you want to do? And she'd be all confused. And the more that we had some sort of structure, the more that she could play within that, and the more free she felt to just
Hmm.
be herself and do whatever. But having that structure is, I think, so critical. And over the summertime, we certainly have these routines. A lot of it, I know for us, some of the important things that we do in through the school year fall off a little bit over the summertime. And granted, we have a little bit more time and flexibility with all those things. But I think some of those things that really help our kids grow are great through the fall. And yeah, getting back to those are going to be fantastic for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, what does it look like for you guys right now then ramping up for back to school?
Well, one thing for us, granted, so we've been really good at this over the summertime as well. We've done our best especially with the sun staying out a lot later. Our kids, they're a bit younger. They're 4.5 and 8, and they still had pretty much the same bedtime throughout the whole summer. So it was 8 to 8:30. They were in bed sleeping. We had blackout blinds in their room, so it got relatively dark in there. And so that was something that, granted, they're still younger, so we've been able to maintain that. I can imagine that especially when times are, like if we're going to go on a trip and we know that things are going to be kind of thrown off, we will set the bedtime a little bit earlier to start to accommodate for that, especially when they get back. And so one thing we're going to continue doing is the bedtime stuff. One thing that we moved away from that I'm looking forward to moving back into is our ritual around dinner and just having dinner together at the table without any devices or TV, anything like that. And that's something we got away from because we'll just go out, eat out on the deck, or I'll be out a little bit later. Our schedules are a little bit all over the place, so my wife won't be around for dinner, or I won't be. So the kids will end up sitting in the playroom watching TV, or things like that. But I think one of the really great anchor points for us was sitting down for dinner together and just being able to have that connection time. I really valued that big time, especially that they were away at school all day, and now in the summertime I'm either away at my office or my wife is away for the day, and so it's a great time for us to reconnect. And also for us as a family, just to learn, so I get to learn about what the kids went through that day. And so one thing that we'll always ask them a couple questions at dinner time, and that's something again we moved away from and kind of dropped over the summer for the most part. But questions about their day, and something that I learned. I'm not exactly sure who we learned this from, but moving away from just questions about like, hey, so what did you do today? I can't remember how many times when I would ask my older daughter that, like she would have been in grade 2 last year, that she, oh, so what did you guys do at school today? And she'd be like, I don't know. We're like, what did you learn? I don't know. And so questions more about like, hey, what was like a great thing that you played with your, like a great thing that happened today? It's like something they were appreciative of. Or, hey, did you get the chance to help anybody today? And so to really get them to start to think about those things, as like start to recall, like, oh, was I of service today? When did I have fun? What did I appreciate? Did I meet somebody new? Did you play with somebody new? Like those sorts of things. And I think those are the things that are really important, because that one thing I know we both agree on, and we talked about, this could definitely be a much grander topic, and we can go off on tangents on all of this stuff, is just like the education system. And so if our communication with our kids is all based around like the system and what happened within that system, I mean, I don't really care. I don't really care about much of that. But what I care about is the character that they're building through the community that they have in their schools. And so that's what we want to pour more into. So the questions that we ask around the dinner table and that spark conversation, I think are really, really great. And the other thing, just like you're talking about the routines in the morning as well. So make sure that our kids have breakfast in the morning, that they're getting themselves organized, and that myself is organized as well. So one thing that is so critical, and we've talked about this before, is if we want our family to be successful, if we want our kids to be successful, us as dads, I believe in the leadership in a leadership position in our household, that we need to be organized within ourselves, that we need to fill ourselves up before. Because if I wake up and I'm like thrust into chaos, then it never ends well for anybody. So one thing that I've maintained mostly over the summertime, well, actually for sure in the summertime, all the time, is I've been up, especially before, at least I'm up before my wife, and most of the time up before my kids, so that I have time for myself, so I can fill my cup up, do my visualization, my meditation, my journaling, even getting into some deep work first thing in the morning. And so that when the kids get up, then I have time and presence of mind to be able to make breakfasts and lunches and, greet people for the day, to allow them to kind of start their day with some sort of comfort and certainty.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on, man. Yeah. You're always so good about bringing it back inward, and how our outer world can be a reflection of our inner world. And if we want our kids to have a great morning and to get off on a good foot, and for things to feel, organized and at peace, then, entirely we need to be in that place ourselves, and to feel organized and to feel calm and to feel like, we're the one putting that state out into the family, and that, they can feel that, right? Because if we come into the morning completely unorganized and sleeping in and don't have our shit together and haven't done our stuff to fill our own cup, then that's not setting up the overall family, or it doesn't matter what it is, right? Family, employees, team, whatever you might be involved in. If you're showing up in a state that's overwhelmed and disorganized and chaotic, then your outer world is largely going to be a reflection of that, right? Your kids are going to be disorganized, they're going to be chaotic, and if you don't know that that's what's going on, if you're not looking within, then you're just going to be like, why is it always so hard? Why is it always so chaotic? Why is it always so stressful? But we get to set the standard for how that's going to unfold largely. I mean, even if they're not ready on time. I mean, there's a way for things to still feel calm and still feel organized, even if it doesn't go exactly the way we want, right? Like if we're in a great,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know this, right? That's why agree that my routines are so important for me, because it allows me to get to a place where my cup already feels full, that I already feel like I've got things organized. I already feel centered and grounded within myself. And then if the morning it doesn't matter what happens in the morning at that point, like largely it can go completely off the rails, and I'll still be able to bring calm and peace and love and some stability to the kids and wife and whoever else is needing it in that morning. And that's also an energy and sort of a feeling that they kids can lean on, right? Where they're like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's also important for them to have that felt experience of what, we bring to that environment, so that they can realize like, okay, I don't have to freak out even if I slept in, or if I'm going to be late, or I have this big thing today. They don't maybe necessarily know how to put it in words right now, but they'll have that going forward. Like I know my own dad had a lot of calm and a lot of organization, and just seemed like he had things, which he did actually. Had things quite well organized and quite in control for himself. And that, even though we never talked about it, and I don't even know if he intentionally did it, that was just an experience that I could feel and be in the presence of, that let me know, okay, that's what it could look like. That's what it felt like. I can do that. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
anyways, I think that's a great place to be, and to get to for ourselves, to be able to set that standard for others.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that it does for me as well is I've realized is that not only do my routines in the morning and do our family routines whenever, do they help us, or does they help me to just get through those moments, but also when things do inevitably go off the rails, it allows them to come back way better, way more efficiently, way quicker, and with more ease and more certainty. So it's also teaching me that like whatever happens, like there's the thought that we never rise to the level of our expectation and potentially our desire, but we always fall back to the level of our training. And so the level of our training, the things that we do moment to moment, day to day, and our routines and rituals allow us to, like, that's like you were saying. I love how you always put like the standard, like this is the standard, like the thermostat in the house. So whatever that is happening around outside, if outside is very cold, the thermostat it's going to heat everything up to make sure that it kind of sits that level. And once it gets a little bit above that, it'll turn off to bring everything back down. And our own personal thermostat is set by our routines and rituals. And so how disciplined we are, and I believe for me especially, it allows me to be more creative, to be more present with my kids, to be more present with my work, to have better ideas when I've taken care of all of the other disciplines that I need to take care of, to make sure that I can have that. Because if I don't have that, when I don't have that, my mind's scattered. I don't know what's coming next. I'm just all over the place. So the level of presence, the level of creativity I have with anything, whether it be with my kids or my work or my wife or anything like that, just suffers. And it all comes down to, and I fought this for years with just feeling like I just wanted to be free. And freedom for me felt, or I thought it was the idea of I just needed to be spontaneous. I could just do whatever I want, whenever I want. We have this idea like if I had just total freedom, I could just do anything at any time. Well, yeah. And that comes with some responsibility. So many people have this idea that, let's say like just from a personal standpoint, I want to, if I win the lottery, I never have to do anything ever again. So what are you going to do? Well, let's say I'm going to go sip some Mai Tais on the beach in Mexico somewhere at a beautiful resort. Okay, well, cool, so go do that. So how long is that going to last until you get super bored doing that? And I think for anybody who's listening to this or watching us now, you're cut from a different cloth. You're going to get into those states and you'll be like, okay, it's like, what now? Like we want to do something with our lives. We're people that we want to contribute in a big way. Because if all of our base needs are met of certainty, variety, connection, and love, the two needs of the spirit, the two needs of the soul are growth and contribution. So like, what are we doing to grow and what are we doing to contribute? Well, that contribution, that growth requires another level of discipline. That freedom to do that requires the disciplines. And it wasn't until I learned that, like the more disciplined I am with my time, because I never had a calendar. It was just like I had like these appointments in, but that was about it. But once I set up my time, like chunked my days down, and I like really like my calendar is just full from 4:30 a.m. till 9 o'clock at night. None of it is like, some of it is like deep work time. Some of it is just free time. Some of it is stuff like that, where there could be a lot of variety in there. So it's not like I'm very strict with exactly what's going to happen every moment, but just having that schedule, like having that set out for me, there was so much freedom that I found in that. And I did not believe it until I actually experienced it. And that's something that I learned a lot from you, is like, you're really well organized with so many things. And I love the way that you think through things and some of that, because it provides me the way that you help me think through some things. It provides, or it gives me a lot of freedom of creativity and allowing myself to kind of go to that higher level because those other things are taken care of. And I think that's so critical with our kids as well. Like we're talking about, just going back to just having those anchors. When we have those anchors within ourselves, we are able to provide those anchors for our kids. Those, then they're able to learn from that example, and through their own lived experience, be able to start to do that themselves. Because ultimately, we just want them, like, we're doing all of this stuff so that they can grow up to be productive, fulfilled adults, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there. Yeah, on the, pick up on the scheduling thing there, and I appreciate that. Sometimes I just blabber on, but if some of it's been helpful for you, that's awesome. The
It always
the
is.
the piece around schedule, the piece around scheduling is, I remember this article I read. Actually, it would have been like 15 years ago. Still, actually remember it though. It was from, I don't remember who the CIO at Google was at the time, but I've lived a lot in different tech roles, and the article is around, and I don't even know if this is true, but it stuck with me and it did impact me, and it does help me a lot in terms of organizing myself and creating that freedom, like because I do have all these ways where, at least the article is around, how much we can remember, like our brain being kind of like the active memory of our computer, like it can only remember so many things. And I think the article said like we can only actively remember like seven things at once. Again, I don't know if
Mm,
that's entirely true, but I do get the concept of, if we're trying to remember, if we're trying to just actually remember it and we don't have it anywhere written down, if we're trying to remember life, if we're trying to remember our appointments and the things we want to get done and, the things we're supposed to do, and if all this stuff is bouncing around in our active memory, it chews up a ton of resources that aren't available to have that freedom to think about new things, or to have that freedom to think about nothing, or to feel just like I don't have to remember all this stuff. Like that, to me, that just feels stressful and overwhelming. Which is why, the article was around how to create structures. The guy used scaffolding, or in terms of like putting things in places where you could always get to them. And so,
mm,
it was kind of like the Google way of thinking of things. But the bigger thing I took away was, the more things I can have written down in a place where I can always get to them, the less things I need to remember. And so I developed, I think for myself, and I've helped my kids with this a lot, and our family and my wife is, for example, with scheduling, yeah, everything is in my calendar that I need to remember. Not, like yourself, not just appointments, but time I'm giving myself to think about something, time I'm giving myself to work on something, free time I'm going to go and, go for a motorcycle ride. That's in the calendar. A lot of times. Sometimes, also, what's great is, because I know everything is in my calendar, I know when there is a free block of time. So I don't
mm,
necessarily have to schedule everything. I know, okay, I have nothing in my calendar right now. I know everything I'm supposed to do is in here, and there isn't anything. Okay, I'm going off for a ride. So I do like what you're also saying there, and I do agree where having some of these structures does give us more freedom, and having the discipline to have things in the calendar and follow things that are in the calendar gives us the freedom to go, okay, I know everything is right here in front of me, and okay, I've created this time for myself. I can do what I want with it. I've scheduled it to do this. I'm going to do that, or I've scheduled it to do nothing. I'm going to go and do whatever I want, which just, yeah, feels very liberating, feels very free. But yeah, my wife and I share. Actually, we had a shared calendar, but that didn't work with permissions and all that. Anyways, because we use different accounts, but we send, so everything to do with our own schedules is in there that overlap. We send it to each other. The kid stuff's in there. The older kids both have their own Gmail account, so they use Google Calendar as well. So, their
mm.
schedule
Great.
stuffs are in there, their sports stuff, their physio, whatever. So largely the key things that our family needs to know about is at least in the calendar. And then, the other thing I find super helpful, there's probably only a few places that I think are super important for me to have things that I know I can get to. Again, they're not in here anymore. I use Google Keep, some sort of note taking app, but I like Keep because I can get to it on any device, anywhere I am. And so I'll just dump thoughts, things I need to remember in there as well. Like, not things that need heavy security, but, my personal health number, I don't think it needs a huge amount of security. It's in there if I need to, or my WestJet flight ID number, it's in there. I don't put passwords, I don't put those kind of things in there. But and then checklists, that's another huge thing that I use for it. So, going skiing is super. My son does a lot of skiing, so like every single time we leave the house, even if we've done it 1,000 times now, I'll still run through the checklist, because inevitably we'll forget one thing that could be obvious, but obviously super crucial. Like, I've forgotten my ski boots before, and you drive. Well, in this case, that was only half an hour, but you drive a long way to get to the mountain, and it can really mess things up if you forget something important. So,
Yeah.
checklists, again, give us the freedom to not have to think about it every time what I need to do. I don't have to remember what I need to get to go out the door. It's like, boom, let me just follow the checklist. I've written it down. I've made it better over time. That's a huge thing that I also feel like frees up our mind and our memory to be able to use it for other things. And the last thing will be some sort of the working documents like Drive and stuff like that. Everything's in there as well. So if I therefore, I don't have to actively remember all these things. I don't have to know what I'm supposed to do today. I've already pre-programmed that out and planned that out ahead of time. Anything else that I think is important is somewhere that I know I can always get to from this thing here. And for me, that kind of discipline and that kind of system creates a ton of freedom because now my mind is wide open to know that I have the time and space to be on this. It's super present with you right now. I'm not actively having to think about what I need to do after this, right? Because I already have that all planned out. So anyways, that was a long-winded rant on just, yeah, having systems and discipline to create freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that was also a game changer for me was having some sort of place that I could brain dump things throughout the day. And so I use app called Todoist on my phone, which is also a cross-platform app. You can use it wherever, but I just have a widget on the front of my phone and also have an automation on. So I've got an iPhone. I'm in the iPhone camp. You're in the other camp. Either way, they both work. So I will just tell my phone just create a new what I think it's create task. So just a create task is just the way that I have to put it, and then it just creates a little note. And so I just have a note, or I guess just a bunch of notes, bunch of little task things that I'll just dump throughout the day, whether it's an idea, whether it's something I have to go pick up, whatever it is. And I've set it up so that, because I think one thing that's really, really key and something that was a game changer for me was realizing that if I wanted to have a stellar morning routine, if I want to have a morning, to get up early, because now I'm up extra early. So I'm up somewhere between 4:30 and 5 every morning. And if left to my own devices, I would also likely also be up until 2 or 3 in the morning. So going to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning and getting up at 4:30, they don't add up. It does not work. And so what I had to develop and what I had to learn, and what I've learned from a lot of different people, thankfully there are people who are much smarter than me that can help me along with this, was to have a nighttime routine as well. And so having a nighttime routine for that. So let's say, so I call it two things. So in my morning routine, I call it Mission 1440, 1,440 minutes in a day. So I plan out and I look at how am I going to spend this 1,440 minutes today. So every morning I'll get up and I have a checklist on Todoist. It seems very blah, but it has been a game changer for me. So I go through. So the first thing is I read my intention. I have an intention that I want to set, like my kind of goal intention for December 31st, 2026. So I did this a year ago. So it was like a 3-year vision. Like, so what is happening 3 years from now? And I picture myself in that. And that's the first thing that I do first thing in the morning. Then I'll go through some journaling. Then I go through a meditation. We've learned from Tony Robbins, priming, like nerve system priming. Then I'll go through chunking my day. So putting my 3 most important tasks of the day into my calendar. Like what's the things I have to get done today. So I go through my calendar first thing in the morning. And so there's, it's a little bit more than that, but that's essentially it. But then at the end of the day, I call it review and reset, or reset and review, one of the two, whatever it is. And so I'll look at, I'll ask myself some questions about like what went great today? What can happen? What can be better tomorrow? And all goes through my list of all the different things that I've dumped into into my Todoist that most of the stuff I've forgotten about already. Like, oh yeah, there's that idea, or oh yeah, I got to go pick this up tomorrow, or whatever it is. And I'll just place those into wherever they either have to put them on a calendar somewhere, whether it's an idea, so I can play it. So I just review all the stuff from the day, and move anything else that I need to tomorrow, and just so I can just have a reset. So again, so being able to go to sleep, not having to think about a million things. I was somebody that number one, I would stay up, like before we had kids, my wife and I were night owls. So we were up at all hours of the night. So an idea would strike, like, oh, I'll just get working on something, or, I was not super organized, but having kids really necessitated being way more organized with my time. And also, if I want to get up at the time that I do, I've got to go to bed early. And so going to bed a lot earlier also required me to have some better routines so that I can not, so I'm not in bed at 10 o'clock and wired. And so having that little reset at the end of the day has allowed me to just kind of come down. And part of it, like when it clicked for me was when we had kids, was the whole dinner, bath, bed routine. So after dinner, for us anyways, so we have dinner between 5:30 and 6 every night. And when we were sitting down at the kitchen table, we'd be done by 6:30. So we'd play around for a few minutes, clean up. And then 6:45 to 7 was bath time. So my kids now are getting into doing showers. They want to have showers in the bath. Which they're having fun with that. But just essentially just starting that bedtime routine. And anytime that we did not have the routine, or we got home late from something, or we were on a vacation and we didn't have the routines, inevitably the next morning is chaos. Inevitably that night is chaos. And so it really ingrained in me like, oh yeah, like they need these routines just as much as I do. And when I had the routines just like them, man, everything was so much better. So I think just bookending those, beginning of the day, end of the day, really allows those kind of two anchor points to have really just set the standard for how the rest of the day can happen. So, like, if you ever, remember, do you know the Pomodoro technique?
Yeah,
familiar with that?
Yeah. Set a timer.
So, so one thing I found interesting, and just I think there's the corollary. So the idea was they did these studies where they looked at our comprehension and our learning ability, and what they found was, they say, like over the span of a 60-minute period, that our retention in learning and our retention in productivity was best right in the beginning and right at the end. And so what they did is, rather than having, so let's say you had a 60-minute time slot, rather than having one 60-minute time slot, they're like, what happens if you had two slots in that 60 minutes? So what they did was, so that you'd set a timer for 25 minutes. So you start at minute zero, you go for 25 minutes, then you have a 5-minute break. Then you had another 25 minutes. So essentially in the span of 60 minutes, you're only actually working or learning or studying, whatever it is, for 50 minutes. But what the studies found, was that because you have two anchor points, you have two beginnings and two ends, that you actually retain more and are productive more in that short time span because of those things. And so we think we're going to do these marathon times or slots of work or learning or studying, but you're actually way more effective if you, one, take some more breaks, and two, chunk them down. And I thought about, well, if you extrapolate that as in the day, let's say like your span of your day, if you have if you have anchors like that, so let's say like your day is that, so you have an anchor in the beginning, you have an anchor at the end with those routines. Those are the things that allow for those everything else in the middle to be way better. And those are the things that, so if you're retaining more in the beginning, which means all of your focused, concentrated, conscious time and energy in spending in looking at your vision, thinking about your life in a more compelling way, then that helps everything else. And then having that anchor point at the end where you're reviewing so like Tony Robbins was so great about the idea of like not thinking about things as like good and bad. It was like good and better. It's like, okay, so what went well today and what can go better tomorrow? So it's just that reframing was great. But having that anchor right at the end of the day just allowed for so much more productivity, allowed for so much more focus, allowed for so much more learning because of those anchors. And that's the thing for me when I came across that, like, oh, that's so much, it just gave it so much more oomph to be able to commit to those routines.
Yeah. That's really good. It's a good reminder of setting up your, work blocks a little more productively like that. Cause I think I do it pretty well even just without having a timer and all that. But because I think naturally, I after sitting too long, I know it's not good to sit very long, so I don't always stand at my desk. But yeah, I'll get up, break up that work cycle, come back, hit it again, and you can feel that you're just more productive like that rather than trying to sit there and slog through something for 2 hours straight. But yeah, how you said this at the beginning in terms of the sort of four sort of essential human needs, certainty and uncertainty are in there, and how by having those nighttime routines, by having those bookends, by having those things that we know, like we can expect, especially for kids too, right? They love. I can see that their nervous systems crave that consistency on one hand, where they know, okay, this is what happens after bed. My certain nervous system can go to rest. It's not like this giant chaotic situation every night, or it's not this chaos in the morning. You can just see how well their nervous system responds to that. And it's quite easy for them to go to sleep now, right? Because their system's like, yeah, this is what happens. We do this, we do that, we do that, and then I go to sleep. And that and I've, through the Tony events, he does some big exercises on certainty and uncertainty. We can't do that with all of our life, right? We can't have life be certain because, of course, there's all kinds of stuff that's going to come up that's not. So that's where you can get into trouble if you try and make everything certain and
Hmm.
have to have everything a certain way. That's when we get into trouble when we crave certainty because it also then creates a lot of stress when things aren't going to go the exact way we want. And if we expect them to, then that can create all kinds of stress. But certainly for kids, having a good degree of certainty for certain things can really help because especially when you're young, there's like everything's uncertain largely. Like you don't like you're everything you're learning so much at a young age that there's so much that's uncertain. It's just I think so valuable, even more so at that age, to have things that you can count on that are going to be certain. And then certainly as you get on in life, I think it's important, like I think the tendency could be that more and more you want more and more things to be certain because you think you know how things are going to play out, but now it becomes, at least for me, a really good dance around, okay, these are the things I know are going to be certain. I'm committing to do them. They're in my calendar. These are my routines, all that. But then making sure I've got lots of space for things that I allow to be uncertain, and have some great variety and have some surprise and have some wonder and creativity. And yeah, it's a dance, right? Because you don't want to have nothing set up and live in a total world of uncertainty and chaos because that's going to be probably overwhelming for someone's nervous system. And you don't want to live in a world where I've got everything figured out and everything dialed in and I don't leave anything to chance because that's going to be, I don't know, boring maybe or stressful at least because things might are likely
Hmm.
not going to go that way all the time.
Yeah, I think being able to teach that to our kids, that really, when in the moments of, so another word for, let's say, uncertainty is variety, is the unknown. And while that is a human need, what we bring into that to counter that or to balance that is the certainty within ourselves. And so what we're trying to teach our kids is that regardless of what comes up, regardless of what variety or whatever uncertain moment is upon you, that what's certain is that you can do it. What's certain is that you are okay. What's certain is that you are enough. And that when they can go into those moments knowing, and also especially when they're younger, I believe it's like the certainty that they have is not necessarily the certainty within themselves, but it's that outward certainty in us that they know that, let's say, like when my daughters, when they fall or something like that, the first thing I know that they do is they look for me. And I've I've seen it so many times. Their reaction to what happens is dictated by my reaction. So if I play it off like nothing's going on, they're much more likely to be okay. Like if they had a big fall or something that was really scary that happened, if I don't freak out, they're cool. So they derive a lot of that certainty from us. And as they grow into that for themselves, that in every moment, the certainty is not necessarily that you know what's going to happen, but that you know who you are. Because it's not so much what happens to us, but it's what's our reaction, our response to those things. And so we're teaching our kids to be responsible, to be able to respond to the moment, because we know through our routines, through our practices, that we have developed a resilience, we have developed a calmness and ease in our own nervous system to be able to handle whatever comes our way. And that, again, that comes through a discipline. That comes through a routine. That comes through practice. It's not something we just do once. It's something that we have repeated over and over and over and over and over again. Just like any professional athlete, like it's been said that the amateur will work until they get it right. The professional will work until they can't get it wrong. And so it's just having that. It's like, it's not like Tony teaches. It's in you, as you, it is you. Once it gets to that point, like now I don't have to think about when I wake up in the morning. I love that, everything is, I've just outsourced my brain to my Todoist app now. And I think that's one of the brilliant parts of technology, is I can just fall back into this routine that I know at the end of it is can provide me with power. It can provide me with a sense of purpose. It can provide me with a sense of, okay, I know what's next. And that's what those same routines do for our kids, is it allows them to harness that within themselves, to be able to learn those systems, to have those disciplines within themselves, so that they can be, they grew up and are not dependent on us. And I know you've seen them, and I've seen them, these kids who their parents just do everything for them. The sense of entitlement that they have, and the sense of just helplessness in the face of any uncertainty, is scary. And to think that those are the, like, my kids are going to be off on their own at some point. And if they can't do things, if they can't handle themselves, it's not going to be a great life for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you put that in terms of, life is going to throw stuff at us. It is going to be uncertain, but we can be in a great place. Our kid, how we can help our kids be in a great place through that uncertainty by helping them be more certain within themselves. And the the path to get there is, I'm still working on that too, because life's going to potentially throw bigger and bigger challenges at us. And it's going to really test our discipline and test our routines and test all of that resolve that we've been building. And to get there, I heard you touch on it, is one step at a time, right? The book, the concept of atomic habits, I was thinking about that earlier too, in terms of being able to create these systems. I didn't start out of the gates by just figuring out to put everything in my calendar and using all these things and tracking it all these ways. That was a practice that evolved over a long time, right? To get to the place where I am disciplined, that it is in my system to do these things in the morning. It is just unconscious that I'm going to naturally do these things. I don't need to think about them anymore. But these rituals, this, to build that level of certainty, excuse me, doesn't happen overnight. And so I love the concept of atomic habits, where we could go into it if we want right now, but there is this, there's a science around how to create these habits, or how to make them consistent, how to create that, feeling within is repetition, little bits at a time, setting yourself up for success, but not trying to do it. I guess my bigger point is, if someone's listening to this right now, is don't try and do it all at once. Don't go. I know I've done that too, where it's like, okay, I'll come back from an event and I've learned all this stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it all, starting day one. And it might work, as you ride the enthusiasm of the event and all this newness, but I don't think I've ever been able to create sustainability from that place of trying to do it all at once. The stuff that's stuck is the stuff that I've built up step by step, ladder, each rung of the ladder over time, to a place where it's like, okay, I can't not do this anymore.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. And I'll tell you something that I'm going through right now that I'm finding, like, this is actually really different and great. Going back into the fall, I know one thing that I let go of a little bit, well, not a little bit, significantly, was my eating habits. So because of we didn't have the same dinner time, and any of that stuff, our routines were all over the place. I fell off from eating the way that I know feels best for me. And so in the past, whenever I've found that, oh, I'm way far off from where I want to be, I'll do that. What you just said is like, okay, I'm back. I'm super jacked. I'm super excited. I'm gonna do everything all at once. And when it came to my eating, I was like, okay, it's gonna be meat, fruit, veg, nothing processed, no wheat, no, any of that stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do all that. And I know that I want to do a bit of a cut coming up. And so I want to like lose some weight. So I'm gonna cut down to, like, for me, it's like I had like a pretty strict, like it's gonna be 2,200 calories. It's gonna be 200 grams of protein, whatever it is. So all those things. And then what I realized a little bit before I started this, I'm like, okay, listen, how about this time I start a little bit different? Because I know what I've done before. I've yo-yoed. It's not been as consistent, and it's not been something that I've been able to withhold or to kind of maintain for the long period. So this time, what I decided to do is like, okay, I'm gonna take it 1 week at a time. So the first week, all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut out, like I was gonna cut out bread. All right, so I cut out bread last week. This week, all I'm doing is I'm just making sure that I can eat as much as I want, but I'm just going to make sure that I'm just going to eat protein, or I'm going to eat some meat, fruit, some dairy, some veg, and no grains. Like, okay, so that's all for this week. Then once that's I can feel like, so already it's now Thursday morning. I'm feeling okay, like I've got that feels better for me already. Then next week, then it's going to be okay. I'm going to add. So I've got to whatever happens, I've got to hit. So everything that I've done so far, and 200 grams of protein every day. Okay, so then it's going to be that. Then from once that is settled, then it's going to be okay. It's all of that, the 200 grams of protein, and it's going to be restricted at 2,200 calories per day. And then from there, so just building upon those things. And I can't tell you how much easier it feels to do that, and how much less guilt and shame I feel around when things didn't go, like it's not exactly perfect. And it's like, oh, it feels so much more sustainable that way. So it's like, yeah, it might take me a little bit longer, but I've too often looked at it from, like, my time horizon has been way too short. Like, I'm thinking about it in months when I should be thinking about it in decades. Because if it took me 3 extra months to get these habits dialed and to feel really good about it, but I maintain it for the next 40 years, that's a good trade-off. As opposed to what I've done my entire life is up and down, 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 yo, 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 yo. Like, back on it, off of it, back on it, back off it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I think it's something important for me anyways to express. I'm not sure why this is important for me to express, but like any of the stuff that I'm talking about, I am not a master at most of this stuff. I feel like so much I'm teaching from what I live, and I can only lead from what I live. And also the things that I feel that I need to learn the most, the easiest way to learn it is to teach it. Speak it into existence. Bring it into reality by speaking it. And then number one, it helps me to be more accountable. And two, I get to think through things. And by talking about it, I get to bounce ideas off of you and get your feedback. And I always, get great feedback from you, and feel like I'm much, much better off having a conversation with you than not. So, yeah.
Yeah. I hear you, man. Well, I got it. I'm a master of it all, man. I got it all figured out. You don't yet? Come on. This life thing's easy.
So so maybe we should change the name of the podcast to The Student and the Teacher. Oh no, sorry, the Student and the Teacher.
That's right. Yeah, I got it. I just got it all down. But yeah, I totally, I agree and totally love that perspective of, it's worth taking that extra bit of time now to have it be something that lasts. And that's also been, and maybe it's, our age. I don't know. It's being a dad. It's this time. I don't know, but I've been able to do that, have that perspective a lot better now. Maybe it's with a little bit of wisdom than I did when I was younger, because same thing. I would start something and go fully into it, and then it wasn't sustainable, right? So there'd be this cycling, trying new things, and the longevity. That book, Outlive, probably talked about it enough
Hmm.
already, but that was also something that got me really thinking about. I took that concept of having something important to me decades away, like having a health vision for myself for when I'm 80, and then then working backwards to, okay, and the thing I liked about that book is it wasn't, at least my takeaway from it wasn't was like do all this stuff now. It was, okay, set some goals for, I guess it was kind of looking at it over the long term, is having some goals for when I'm healthy now, have some goals for when I'm healthy, I'm 50 and 60, and then eventually here's what I'm going to be when I'm 80. But then just taking that, I guess when you have a bigger time horizon, like I heard you say there, you realize you can take a little bit extra time now to make it work, right? You can take that 3 extra months to figure things out because the payback is decades, not, we're not trying to get it all done by next week. So that I did have that same mindset with health where I was like, okay, I'm gonna just take, like, I didn't get into all the VO2 max and all the measurement and all that other stuff. It was like, no, can I show myself I'm gonna go for a run? Just one run once a week. I'm not going to time it. I'm not going to measure. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just, can I put on my shoes and go for a run, and then get that consistent? And then can I do this push-ups? And then can I, so I layered, as I heard you were saying with diet, I was layering on things. I don't remember exactly the cadence of it all, but the point was I wasn't adding something new until I had really made the first thing solid, and then adding the
Hmm.
second thing, and then adding the third thing. And then eventually I knew that I would get to a program that would have all the criteria in it that I wanted to achieve this ultimate end goal. And I'm still not there. Like, I'm still adding things, I'm still deleting things, I'm still measuring things. But yeah, that's a really good point about having that bigger. I mean, I like physical analogies, in terms of if you're building a skyscraper, you don't just come along and drop it in place and you're done, right? You got to take a lot of work to dig out the foundation and go down and build things up layer by layer. And it does take a lot of time to get to something extraordinary. But it's at the end of it
Hmm.
all, it's worth it. But yeah, it's yeah, not trying to build it all at once.
Yeah, the height capacity of any structure is determined by the depth of the foundation. No deep foundation, no skyscraper.
Or at least not one that's going to stay up for very long.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome, man.
Uh, yeah.
Any parting thoughts?
Uh, yeah, school next week. I know. Yeah, I'm on a parent thread, and there's just a lot of memes that the parents are sharing around. Oh my, just around. A lot of parents are feeling that just uneasiness because now we're into uncertainty, right? New schedules. Their kids are going to be in different grade, new teachers. So yeah, it's how valuable it can be for us to bring that internal certainty into that uncertain environment and these changes.
Yeah, and I'd just add that as dads, as leaders within ourselves, that we have the opportunity and we have the capacity, and I would have people consider that you, that I, that we set the standard. That don't wait for anybody else. Don't wait for your kids. Don't wait for your wife. Set the standard and like lead from what you live, and that will create more certainty, that will create more trust, that will create more everything amazing and positive with you and your spouse and your kids and your whole family. And as as we always do, we bring it back to like it starts with me. And so consider in this new season, set the standard, raise the standard, and watch what happens.
Right on, man. Awesome to see you. Really appreciate the chat. Have an awesome day.
You too,
Thanks
brother.
everyone for listening.